We're talking climate change facts, fictions, and solutions. And now we're on to question 3. So what? Who even cares? I mean, we're talking about a change in the temperature of our planet of about 1 degree Celsius or almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit, but there's a bigger temperature difference between the room I'm in right now and the next room than what we're talking about happening to our planet. Why does it matter? It matters because the temperature of our planet over our human life scales is as stable as that of a human body. Imagine if your child was running a fever of 1 or 2 or even 3 degrees. We'd get worried, we'd reach for the Tylenol, might even eventually head to the doctor. One of the biggest myths that we've bought into when it comes to climate change isn't the myth that it isn't real, it's the myth that it doesn't matter. Back in video 1, I showed you one of these maps looking at how many people think scientists agree when it comes to climate change. This is another map. This map asks, do you think climate change will affect you, harm you personally? Again, anything that's blue is less than 50%. Anything that's orange is more. And as you can see, almost the entire United States is blue. That means that even if we think this thing is real, which the majority of people do, we don't think it matters. Why don't we think it matters? Because every time we look at a book or a movie or even a website or a news article about climate change, there's one picture that everybody uses. And what is that picture of? It's something that is big, it's white, it's furry, it's a polar bear, preferably perched on a piece of melting ice. If the polar bear is the only reason we care about climate change, there's surely easier ways to fix the problem, right? But the reality is that we care about the polar bear because after the polar bear, we're next. Why do we care about climate change? Here's just a few examples. Let's look at the number of days per year over 100 degrees. On average, even in Texas, we only get a few of those days every year. But the further we head into the future, the more our summers will look like a crazy summer we already experienced in 2011. Where I live in Texas, we saw almost 50 days over 100 degrees, and some places saw well over 70 days over 100 degrees. When I look at this map, though, I was amazed because 4 years before this, I had actually made this map showing what our average summer would look like by the middle of the century if we continue on our current pathway. It looks amazingly like the summer of 2011 in the part of the country where I live in Texas and Oklahoma. If we go even further, it looks even worse. Why else might we care about a changing climate? It's because in a warmer atmosphere, water evaporates faster. So when a storm comes along, like it always does, there's more water vapor sitting up there for that storm to pick up and dump on us. Why do we care about heavy rainfall? It's because we have so much infrastructure, so many impervious surfaces. When that rain hits, it can't just soak into the ground, it runs off and it also often floods. If we look over the last 60 years or so around the United States, we have seen major increases in heavy precipitation, especially focused in the Midwest and the U.S. Northeast. These are increases that have already happened. We're not talking about the future. We're talking about what's already happening today. We've also, and this is kind of crazy, in those parts of the world where we're seeing more frequent heavy rainfall events, we're also seeing heavier snowstorms. Why? Because it's still cold enough to snow, but when a snowstorm comes along, there's more water vapor sitting up there for that storm to pick up and dump on us. Ironically, we're also seeing stronger droughts. Why? For the same reason. When a high pressure system parks over us, and a high pressure system is what deflects all the storm patterns away from us so it doesn't rain, when that high pressure system moves in, as it always does, especially in the part of the country where I live, there's no storms there to collect up all that water vapor and dump it on us. But it's still warmer than average, so evaporation rates are still happening faster, which means that the soils as well as the ground dries out faster, as do our reservoirs, our lakes, our rivers, and our streams, impacting our water resources as well as natural ecosystems. Why else do we care about a changing climate? Well, in the western United States, warmer, longer, drier periods have increased the area that wildfires are burning. We aren't seeing more wildfires today than we used to, but when we do get a wildfire, it's burning a much larger area than it used to. We're also seeing changes in plant hardiness zones. The USDA plant hardiness zones have already changed significantly from 1990 to their most recent maps. And if we look to the future, we expect those to continue to change. more if we continue to depend on fossil fuels under a higher future scenario, and not as much, but still pretty significantly, if we can transition relatively quickly off fossil fuels onto clean sources of energy. We're also seeing changes in the places where trees and plants will grow, changes in the places where certain animals or insects or birds would live. We're seeing major changes already happening today, and many of those are projected to not just continue, but to accelerate in the future. Another study we did for California looked at 50,000 native or endemic plant species. And we showed how the ranges for those species, like the interior live oak here in this picture, would shift as climate changes depending on how sensitive the planet is, as well as how much extra heat-trapping gases we're putting into the atmosphere. This is a similar analysis we did for Kellogg's monkey flour. There's a little picture of it up there in the corner, and you can see that the ranges are expected to shift significantly. What else is going to happen? Another study we did looked at wildfire activity, and we found that the vast majority of the globe would experience a disruption in wildfire activity. Some places would increase, others would decrease. And you might say, oh, well, a decrease is good, right? Not necessarily, because many ecosystems require wildfire as part of a functioning ecosystem. We are going to see changes across much of the world. And if you'll notice here, a lot of the places where we don't see changes, like the Sahara Desert, there just isn't anything to burn. We also expect to see pests moving poleward. We talked about kudzu earlier in the second video, and one of our analysis we did focused on the hemlock woolly adelgid that's killing trees in the Northeast, hemlock trees. The hemlock woolly adelgid's northward limit is currently limited by cold winter temperatures. But as it gets warmer and warmer, and again, winter's warming faster than almost any other season in the year across much of the United States, those range limits will expand further and further north. We also care about climate change because it affects us. It affects our water resources, our agriculture, our energy demand and supply, and the bottom line is it affects our economy. This is a report that was written by Michael Bloomberg and Hank Paulson talking about the economic impacts of climate change. It isn't just about the polar bear, but it isn't just about the natural environment either. It's about all of us that live here on this planet that are perfectly adapted to the conditions we have had over the last few centuries. And as those conditions change, and the faster they change, the worse off we'll be, as they change, it's going to cost us to try to keep up. Why do we care about a changing climate? We care because it exacerbates the risks we already face today. What risks do we already face? Many natural species face extinction, habitat loss, disruption. We face issues like extreme heat and cold, floods and droughts, hurricanes and wildfires. In many of those cases, climate change will exacerbate the risks that we face today, and that's why we care.